Our speaker today, where are you, Dave? Hey, okay. Our speaker today is David Rothschild. Dave is a lifelong resident of the North Shore and carries on his family's legacy with the North Shore Senior Center. Both his father and uncle were members of this organization. He has been a member of the Saints of Chicago organization for 15 years, currently serves on their board as secretary. He is also involved with the marketing and finance committee. So if you will please welcome Dave Rothschild.
That's all you can say about me?
Hmm?
That's all you can say about me? 40 all time.
And he was an All-American football star.
Right. Yeah. Hi, good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. It was Bob and I started chatting back in December, January about doing this. You plan ahead. That's good. I think Bob's a good guy. Nice to see there's some familiar faces, some friends of mine from my old Skokie days and so on in terms of that. And I'm going to speak about the history of the Saints for a bit, and which I know is the topic of my discussion, and then there'll be time on the back end to happy to take any questions that you may have. Since Bob brought it up, I'd like to see a show of hands. How many people know about the Saints? Yes. All right. Good. I'm going to make an educated guess, just by another show of hands. Did most of you join the Saints when you retired? Well, a small amount. Okay, cool. So, traditionally, and there's no wrong answer to this, there's a lot of people when they retire. By the way, I just turned 65, but I still work for a living. Um, look for things to do, just like coming here to the senior center and so on. And a lot of people um, joined the Saints at that time. That's just historical data. There's nothing wrong with that. But the Saints is not just for retirees and so on in terms of that. We've done a good job of, and I can pat myself on the back of that for that, to recruit younger members, so to speak. I'm not saying, younger as in 30s and 40s and so on. We do have some people in their 20s, but the Saints does not just market themselves to the senior population. So a bit of history about the Saints. Um, the Saints started and I apologize, I'm reading from some notes on here, and but again, I'll have time for questions and impromptu stuff along the way. The Saints started way back in 1980. The reason we're called the Saints is because there was a group of volunteers back in 1980 that worked volunteered at the St. Nicholas Theater in Chicago, which was located in around Halsted and Diversey. And they were helping out on all sorts of things, not ushering related, and so on. By the way, the formal name of the Saints is Saints Volunteers for the Performing Arts. And performing arts is a very broad definition in terms of that. Most of the work we do is in theaters, but we also volunteer at concerts and other performing arts types events and so on in terms of that. So again, these people were working, and again, I wasn't around there back in 1980. But these people that were helping out in theater at St. Nicholas were doing everything from mopping floors to helping build sets and so on and so forth. But they were getting a little bit bored and they were looking for more to do besides what was going on within St. Nicholas. And so, according to the history records, about 100 of these volunteers sat down and chatted and created what is now called the Saints, which was just abbreviated, which was just a pickup from the word St. Nicholas. And they figure Saints, people associate the name Saints with doing good and so on. And again, we're not a religious organization by any means, in terms of that. So the Saints were born back in 1980, and back in those days of the Chicago theater, it was much smaller than it is today. Chicago is a great theater town. I don't have to tell anybody in this room about that. There's awesome theater, both in, I use the word Chicago, but Chicago and then north, south, and west. You go east, you're going to get your feet wet. So Chicago is a great theater town in terms of that. downtown at that time, the big kahuna in terms of theater was the Goodman, still around today. And Goodman, by the way, is also Saints venue, and I'll talk about Saints venues and so on in a little bit. Um, Back in when the Saints started, um, Steppenwolf was not where it was on North Halsted. Steppenwolf started by a bunch of guys, including someone by the name of Gary Sinise and others from Highland Park. There's your trivia for the day. John Malkovich, too, another founder of Steppenwolf. Lori Metcalf. They were all hanging around in St. Nick and other places back in those times. And again, this was the infancy of what's now Chicago Theater. And then what happened so these 100 people were brainstorming in terms of what they wanted to do. And a couple of them came up with the idea with, hey, it's an easy gig to become an usher at these theaters. Because theaters generally in Chicago operate on a bare bones budget. They depend on volunteers, just like you have volunteers here at this organization, as well as many other organizations um, in the area. And so they started out with the idea, hey, we can give provide ushers for all these theaters. And that's what the Saints are known for today. A lot of activity from the Saints began from beyond St. Nick. It moved over to what was then the Organic Theater. A lot of you may remember that from a long time ago. And Organic Theater was heavy promoters and users of the Saints. And then at that time, later on in the year, in that time frame, the League of Chicago Theaters, which is still very known today, which is like the parent organization that most Chicago theaters today are part of. League of Chicago Theaters came into existence back in 1984. And we then, the Saints affiliated ourselves, and we affiliated with the League of Chicago Theaters. And that's how theaters become aware of us in terms of that. Organic Theater was a big, again, user of the Saints. And then also it was a good catalyst for Chicago theater growing over time. One of the plays that they were known for back then was a play called ER. Nothing to do with the ER TV show, but coincidentally it's very similar name. That was a very successful production that ran for many, many years. And again, Saints were part of that as well. Saints back in the early 80s and stuff also did, besides ushering, they still did a lot of the grunt work that kept theaters going at that time. And then as time went on, the Saints started out at, again, around 100 members. And then just like any other good business, word of mouth is your best advertising. And then other theaters became aware of us. And the Saints started to grow. And subsequently, around another 50 people joined. And then the Saints at that time had never had a true office besides what was at St. Nick. And so then we established our office, an actual office inside the Organic Theater. I seem to remember as a kid going to Organic Theater, but I really don't remember much about it. I think my parents took me there. Some of you in this room may have been there at one point or another. And I think I saw Jesus Christ Superstar. Could be wrong. I'm a little fuzzy on that. And then back in 1986, Chicago theater veteran Bernard Salins, heard of him, and his wife Jane started what was then called the International Theater Festival of Chicago. Again, I don't remember that, but it was like the World Series or whatever, or United Nations of Theaters. Theaters from all over the area put on productions here in Chicago. Again, the Saints were all part of that. That's when they started branching out and helping out other productions besides what was going on at Organic and at St. Nick. Back in, and again, the story I'm reading verbatim from another Saint historian. I'm assuming the story is true, but I want to read this to you because it's really funny. At least I think it's funny. I'm reading this verbatim. Back in 1992, we signed up to, and I'm reading this verbatim, haul dirt at the original location for Steppenwolf Theater. They had a production running called Nobody Writes to the Colonel. And if you never saw the show, apparently mud is a key component of this production, and dirt plus water equals mud. And so the Saints were gluttons for punishment, for lack of better terminology, and they got a festival T-shirt that read "Sand and Dirt" in multiple languages and so on, reflecting all the mud and stuff that they had to haul in and out of the Steppenwolf Theater during this production of Nobody Writes to the Colonel. But we don't do that stuff now in terms of that. We keep our hands clean and so on. We wear nice clothes, but I'll talk about that in a moment. At that time also, the Auditorium Theater became known for its productions and so on, and the Saints were able to branch out and become ushers at the Auditorium Theater. And then these theaters didn't have enough ushers. And then again, word of mouth by way of the League of Chicago Theaters spread word to these theaters that, hey, we got a bunch of volunteers looking for stuff to do. And lo and behold, Saints had made appearances at many other theaters. And we got to see a lot of cool stuff back then. And again, we still see cool stuff today just as anybody else can, but we can see it for nearly free. And we'll get to that details in a moment. In terms of that, as my wife says, and those of you here know, a few people here know my wife, the Saints is the greatest theater gig in town. For a small and for your annual dues donation, again, I'll get to the details in a moment, you can see unlimited amount of theater and performing arts. Your membership will pay for itself after one or two productions if you were to take the same theater that you saw through the Saints and buy a regular ticket for it. Theater today is not cheap. I don't have to tell you that. Even if you're subscribers, in terms of that, the Saints is the greatest gig in town in terms of theater. You can see as little or as much as you want. But again, I'll get into those details in a little bit. And what happened was over time, the Saints had morphed into just collecting dues for their membership. They also, a portion of your dues that you pay each year goes towards, we call them grants. And we give out this past year, grant season, we gave out nearly $120,000 in grants to various theatrical organizations throughout the Chicago area. And there's a whole long process and how these groups have to apply for our grants. We set aside a portion of our budget towards grants, and then we take that bucket of money, divide it out amongst roughly 15 to 20 different performing arts organizations throughout the year. So the Saints is also a benevolent organization. We support the arts in that regard as well. The Saints back in 1990 received the Joseph Jefferson Award. Joseph Jefferson Award is like the local Academy Awards for Chicago theater. We received an award back in 1990 for all our work that we did. Again, way back when. When the Saints started getting their wheels turning, we had monthly meetings at various theaters, just like you guys have your meeting here and so on. We met at different theaters and we had business meetings and so on and so forth. Most meetings had a guest speaker, just like me and so on, and keep people involved. Another classic meeting of the let's see, let's call it a activity of the Saints was back at what was then called the Straw Dog Space, which is now Straw Dog Theater, and so on. There was a show where it involved pie throwing. I'm not making this up. I was not there. I'm only reading from my notes that were prepared for me. It takes six different people during this production. It was called, excuse me, here, I'll tell you the name of the production. Excuse me, it doesn't say that. But anyway, during this production, it takes six people to throw pies at a particular actor throughout production. And Saints were used at that time to throw pies at these actors. We don't do that now, to the best of my knowledge. And instead of using, by the way, they didn't use real pies. They just had paper plates full of Ready Whip, and that's what they threw um, during this production. So another Saints anecdote was, at the time there was a theater in Chicago called Touchstone, not the production company that you see for movies now. At one time at Touchstone Theater, the house manager lost his keys. Again, I'm not making this up. And at that time, one of our Saints that were working at the theater or volunteering theater was a maintenance engineer, and he knew how to pick locks. And so the Saints to the rescue again, and came through, and we got the production going in terms of that. Um, uh, the Saints themselves, as we grew, we had to find a bigger office as well. The small space that we had at the organic was not big enough, and so at that time, um, we moved to a place. This was in 1997. We moved into what was then called the Athenaeum Theater. Oh, see, some people, and but it's not called that now anymore. But at that time, it was the owner of the theater was named Fred Solari, and the school building that was part of there's a church, and there's a building attached to the church. This building's still standing there. It's right at the corner. And Fred Solari made us a really good offer on some office space, which we had up until approximately 4 or 5 years ago when we moved to our current office now. And we had been in the Athenaeum in that space. It was a square space, nothing more than, and we were very bare bones. We still run a very bare bones operation, but our office basically had half a dozen different file cabinets and folding tables and a sorted bric-a-brac of folding chairs that came from other places and so on. And that's where we had our meetings, and we had Wi-Fi, which was a big deal. And away we went, and then we had been operating out of Athenaeum up until about 4 or 5 years ago. And then in April of 1999, we developed a website. Ooh, big deal. Remember, what we take now for the internet, take for granted, wasn't which is now just like air and water. The internet wasn't that big a deal at that time. So in April of 1999, saintschicago.org became into business. And by the way, Saints is plural with an S on the end. And I have, by the way, as a side, I have business cards which I'll be happy to hand out. They has our QR code if you want to find out more information about and perhaps join. But I'll get to that in a moment as well. But saintchicago.org became into existence. And then at that time, it still is to this day, is primarily used as a recruitment tool to get members, because people age out and so on, and we have to keep membership growing. And I'm all in favor of technology and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, word of mouth is still, to any business, word of mouth is still the best advertising. Who do you know? What do you do? Having meetings like this, shaking someone's hand. Bob and I are now best buddies. We didn't know each other 6 months ago, I think, and so on. But basically, seriously, word of mouth, keeping in touch by phone and stuff like that is the way to keep going. And just like being here as part of the senior center. Right now, and then as time went on, we had this thing called the pandemic. And so Chicago theater, just like the world shut down, as we all know, I'm not going to go into details about that. The Saints took a big hit as well. So when we had again in-person get-togethers, those shut down, and theater shut down and so on. But then this great thing called Zoom, which I believe we're using right now to record my production, came into being. And Zoom is a great tool. So during the pandemic, a lot of theaters put on some stuff, by Zoom. The Saints became virtual at that point as well from an administrative standpoint. We didn't have in-person meetings, so all our meetings, our board meetings and so on, social get-togethers were done by Zoom. Our board meetings today, to this very day, are still done by Zoom. It makes it more efficient because our board, while our offices in the city, our board members, live all over the place. And so Zoom is a great tool. So we still meet by Zoom. But fortunately, theaters are back up and running. and we're chugging along just as we did. Our membership dropped just as a lot of Chicago theater shut down and never came back. Those that didn't have deep pockets, there's a lot of the smaller storefront theaters, they just couldn't survive pandemic and they shut down permanently. But most of the um, Chicago theater came back to life, and there's new um, theater groups joining in terms of that. Our membership pre-pandemic was right around 2,300 in round numbers. Right now we're around 1,800 and 1,900 members in terms of that. And the Saints organization, there isn't a single group like us in the United States. We are totally cool, totally unique. There's no group like us ever. There are other groups of volunteer ushers scattered throughout, even in New York City and so on, but nobody does the volume of work that we do and the type of work that we do throughout the United States. Our current office is in a shared space over at 4043 North Ravenswood in Chicago, and it's a building it's got nothing to do with theater whatsoever. It's a commercial space that's got all sorts of other businesses in there, including therapists, photographers. There's a private gym, and so on. The Ravenswood Event Center is in that space. It's a nice building in terms of that. Currently, and this is a great time that I'm speaking about this, our membership year begins June 1st through May 31st. And our current membership rate is $110 per person. And we don't prorate. So regardless of the time of year you join, your membership rate is still the same. For those of you, for people who are 40 and under, and I'm just making speculation here that doesn't qualify to most of the people in this room. But if you have kids, a lot of you have kids and grandkids and so on, or friends. If you're 40, if you're 40 and under, you pay half price on membership for $55 a year. Again, it's the greatest gig in town in terms of that. The way we operate is for those in order to become a member, you have to participate in one of our orientation programs, which is by Zoom. Old days, you had to go schlep into the city or some suburban location to sit through orientation. It takes about an hour, and it just basically tells you the logistics of how to become a saint and what's involved, what your duties are, and so on in terms of that. And then once you sit through orientation, ta-da! You pay your dues, you're in. And then everybody wears, and I think I brought mine in, everyone gets a spiffy Saints badge. I guarantee you, if you've been to play in Chicago, most of you have seen us one way or another. You've seen people with this badge in terms of that. When you become a Saint, every venue that we work has a specific dress code, which they decide on. Most of the theater, when you see our Saints, that we wear all black, solid black shirt, could be a polo shirt, could be a dress shirt, solid black pants, and black shoes in terms of that. Some venues are what we call black and white, where you wear a white shirt, again, solid black pants. We have a dress code it's called Penguin. Saints are also in Symphony Center, CSO. And we work both the CSO programs themselves as well as guest shows that come in. They have a lot of jazz and other stuff and so on. Chicago Symphony Center is what we call a penguin venue, where you don't have to wear an actual tux, but you have to wear black jacket, white shirt, black pants, and a bow tie. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that's what they do. That's their dress code. We just go by the rules in terms of that. But most of the venues are either all black or black and white. Some places they go by business casual, which is a little bit dressier than the way I'm wearing today. But in terms of that, but again, most venues are pretty casual, either all black or black and white in terms of that. When you become a saint, the way it works is you decide when you want to work, how often you want to work. You want to do one show a year, one show a month. I know saints, and I'm not making this up, that literally work 6 or 7 shows a week. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no penalty. We don't keep track of you. Well, we do have a way of keeping track of you, but there's no quotas or anything else like that. If you just want to work one show a year, that's fine. We're okay with that in terms of that. in order to sign up to work at a venue, we have what's called an online program called an Usher module. And basically you hop online, you log in through our website. It takes you to a separate password protected portion of our website, and you can search for shows in a particular region. For if you want to work just in the North Shore, you can look up North Suburban Theaters. It'll show you what's available, how many slots are available, how many ushering positions are available. And if you see something you like and it's got an available slot or available date that you want, one click and you sign up. And then your request goes into what's called a coordinator. Every venue that we serve has a Saints coordinator. I happen to be a coordinator for 4 different venues. So the coordinator, once you click on the button, say, hey, Don and Carol Babbinger want to work at Northlight for a show in August. The coordinator for Northlight gets an email saying, hey, Don and Carol Babbinger want to be a coordinator want to usher at this particular show. The coordinator clicks on a button, he says accept. Poof, Don and Carol Babbinger get an email from us saying, hey, you're in, and I'll have all the details of what time verifying the performance time, how early before the performance is called the report time. Usually most venues are 45 minutes to an hour before the production. When you have to be there, some are a little quirkier with their times and stuff. And you get email confirmation. You also get email reminder a week before the performance you signed up for, just reminding you that you signed up for whatever and so on in terms of that. If your plans change and you need to cancel your assignment, you just hop back onto the website and you can cancel your production as well. And that's it. I'm okay time wise. You're good for Q&A now, or you want me to keep talking for a little bit, or?
That's all you have to say.
Well, that's pretty much about it. The history, we have venues going from downtown all the way up into Lake County. We work, those of you around here, I was just at Riders Theater in Glencoe this past weekend. Great show, by the way, Darvon and Devine Avenue. We go all the way up to as far north as Lake Forest, Citadel Theater, which is in the old West Campus of the high school, Lake Forest High School. We also we go as far west as Drury Lane in Oak Brook, which is a new Saints venue. We just started working there several months ago. And we go south, as far south as Beverly, which is the southwest side of Chicago. And again, a majority of the theater just is where they are located is in Chicago and points north and northwest of the city. But we had venues whenever possible in terms of that. So you get lots of choices. Summer, this time of year, theater action drops a bit. A lot of theaters take the summer off and so on. But in the fall, things pick up and go from there. I'm open to any questions. I have time.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let them in. Thank you. But we gotta let him have the first question. Yes. Wow, yes.
What happens in the case of a no-show?
Oh, no, okay. We do have a couple Saints, or I know of at least one other. Is there any other Saints besides one I know? Oh, so we have a few Saints in the room. Good. You're all adults, so you're expected to have a little bit of responsibility. So yes, no shows are frowned upon. We have it's just like not showing up for class and so on. We strongly discourage no shows. If you fail to no show and it gets reported by the coordinator. So let's pretend you didn't show up for one of the venues I coordinate for is the Skokie Theater. Let's pretend you were a no-show for one of my productions. If I find out about it, then I go on to the same program that the Usher module program, but I go on as an administrator, and I can, if Don, Carol Babbinger forget to show up to one of my venues, I can go on there and issue what's called a sanction. Yeah, it's a sanction, so watch out. And so, if it's the first time offense, It's like a slap on the wrist. And if it's a first time offense besides a slap on the wrist, you are, if Don and Carol forget to show up at the Skokie Theater, is their penalty. They are forbidden to sign up at the Skokie Theater until through the next production at whatever Skokie Theater happens to offer. So that's their penalty. And I'm sure Don and Carol won't cry over that, but that's the penalty for a first time offense. If you are a multiple no-show type person, I'm not picking on you in terms of that. There are more severe penalties than the slap on the wrist. You could be banned for, I forget what, 3 months, I believe, from all venues if it's an ongoing thing. Yeah, so we really discourage no shows. Before we had this usher module, we basically worked off of pen and paper and stuff, and so it was very primitive. The usher module, from our perspective, is a huge advancement because you can sign up whenever you want through online. It's a great tool, but it's also, from our perspective, we can also keep track of you and so on. And but it's not the end of the world, but there's a little bit of consequences associated with it. Yes.
Yes, I was a saint for maybe 3 years, and we were very active downtown. We'd take the train down, take the train back, catch the car, and come home. But then the pandemic hit, and what happened was I lost my person that organized it through the computer, and I'm super lousy with the computer. So I signed up and I paid my dues, maybe a year and a half ago,
Yep.
but it never came to any fruition because using the website was difficult for me. Maybe I'm just a little brain dead in that area, but it was really difficult. And I had been a saint and very active, at least once a week for years.
Mhm.
And then I dropped from the pandemic and then I started again. Then I lost my person that was good with the computer. And now I would really like to join again. I'd really like to be active, but it's not the easiest website to remember.
I understand. I hear you. I understand your frustration. You're not the only person that has brought that attention. The simplest way is and I'm not sure, I think we can help you somehow or others to find a friend or a partner that can help you uh, get through it. In fact, I'm happy to, if you want to rejoin, I'll give you a card. I'll put my phone number on there. You're more welcome to reach out to me, and I can help you get through the program and the usher module and so on in terms of that. But once you do it, it's just kind of like it's just like starting something new. Once you start picking it up and do it a little bit more often, come back. Okay, well, I'm happy to help you, and I'll make sure you get a card with my phone number on it, and I'll take care of you. Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Another perk of being a saint is that if a show you want to see an usher for is closed out because it's so popular and people got to sign up and they don't need any more help with the show, some theaters, many theaters, if you call them, they'll offer an industry price for a ticket if you buy a ticket as a saint.
Thank you. Let me elaborate on what your comment was. When you become a saint, at any time we add you, and you can opt out of it, you get as being a member of the saint, you're also part of the League of Chicago Theaters, and once a week, around Thursday, I don't remember what day it is, towards the end, in the middle of the week, you get an email from the League of Chicago Theaters. And you can also, again, at any time, hop onto the League's website. You don't need a password or anything else like that. On their website is what she was referring to as industry offers. And it changes from week to week based on what's playing at the moment. And even if you couldn't get into see a particular show, that same show may be part of the industry offers page. And then all you need to do is either some places that you can call and tell them you're a saint. And then when you pick up your ticket, you just got to show proof that you're a saint. So you just show them your fancy schmancy ID badge. And then you get a ticket for, they're cheap, half price, 10, 15 bucks, 25 bucks, depending on the production and so on in terms of that. Thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
Can you verify
that my late friend Charlotte Zaporin was very instrumental in the Saints program.
Yep. Yep, I can verify that. I didn't know her for very long. She was around back when I joined in early 2000s. She was, again, I don't know her very well, but yes, her name has come up a lot. She was a secretary for many years, and she was one of the driving force behind the Saints and got it going. Yes, that's a very good name out of the past. Thanks for bringing it up.
Just as a point of information, you mentioned the Saints were kind of born out of the organic theater, and Brother Joe Mantegna was one of the principal actors at the organic, along with Dennis Franz and Meshack Taylor. This is before your time, but some people here would remember these guys. One of the first plays they did was Ray Bradbury's The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit. And that was at the Beacon Theater, Hull House.
Yep.
Question is, how many Saints are there? And
Right now,
Roughly.
around 1800, 1900.
so it's a bunch, it's good, but you need more.
There's always a need. We don't have a limit. Just like any other organization,
Right.
people come and go throughout the year. We don't, we're doing quite fine. Generally speaking, and I'm wearing my coordinator hat now, most shows we're able to provide enough Saints based on whatever their requirements are. One of the tougher shows for Saints to get billed is kid shows. We don't get too many of them, but there are some theaters that provide kid shows, which isn't a great appeal to the average volunteer and so on. But generally speaking, we're able to fill, especially popular theaters and stuff like that. There's no problem us getting ushers. To elaborate on your question, the usher module program that we have is also, there's an automated part of it that when there is a show, let's see, today is only Monday, on twice a week, an email is sent out to you as being a member called Cyberline. And in that is a list of shows that are coming up within the next 2 weeks, I believe. It shows what shows are still open and are looking for ushers and so on. So when you get this email, you can go at any time, or when you get this email, you can go hop into the usher module and look for a show in the northern suburbs, for example, that has an opening and so on, and do it that way. So between all the automated features that we have, we're able to get most shows filled for the most part.
Okay, a couple other questions. Are there assigned seats when you go, or it depends on where you go?
Great show. Great question. So it depends on the venue. For example, I was at Writers. My wife and I were at Writers this past Sunday. For this particular production, the house managers told us, it depends also on the particular day that you're ushering. If it's a show that has lots of vacant seats, venues usually say just grab any 2 seats you want. They usually don't like ushers grabbing the front row seats if there aren't available. Some venues, even like Writers or others, will give you a physical ticket saying, here's your seat, this is where you sit in. So you could sit where they tell you to sit. Some places tell you just grab any 2 seats that you want in terms of that. You will always have a seat. One of the problems years ago, before we had the usher modules, there were some times where a venue would, I'll be very polite here, oversell and sell out all their seats, forgetting that they got ushers that they need to park their butts into somewhere. So that the problem doesn't really exist much anymore. But if it happens to occur, the venue will give you tickets for a future date. We can come back and see the show for free and so on in terms of that. But as an aside, and again, I'm just rambling up because it happened to me, my wife and I years ago before Writers Theater is where it is right now. It was part of the Glencoe, correct me if I'm wrong, Women's Club, I believe was the building. That was the name of it. And then when Writers was being built to what you see now, they were renting space at a church, and I don't remember the name of the church because I'm Jewish, right across on the other side of the metro tracks, and they were renting space in there. and they sold too many seats for that, and there was no place for my wife and I to sit. No questions asked. They said, "Hey, what date do you want to come back and see it on us?" They give us 2 hard tickets to go back the following Saturday or Sunday or whatever it was, and so on. You'll always get a seat. The venues are required to provide seats for their ushers. In the event that there's a hiccup, there's a workaround.
I assume transportation is, you're on your own?
You're on your own to get to the venue. I will tell you that Steppenwolf Theater, which is I go to on a semi-regular basis, they have a garage which they own next door to the south. And Saints, you just show your badge. When you pull in, you can park for $5. Not the general public pays, I think, like 15 or 20. But yes, you're responsible for your own transportation. Some theaters, you get there on your own. And the important thing is to give yourself enough time to get there. I don't have to tell you what driving in Chicago traffic's like. So if you're like Bob and don't show up, you got to give yourself enough time and so on in terms of that. If you're running late, which happens to all of us at one point or another, pick up the phone, call the theater that you're working at, say, "Hey, this is Dave Rothschild. My wife and I are running late. We're stuck in traffic. We're going to be 5-10 minutes late." Theaters in general are pretty accommodating. They're not being jerks or anything else like that.
That comes to my last question, which is, what are your expectations as far as how soon they want you there?
Each venue is a little bit different. Generally speaking, on average, most venues, you have to be there an hour before the production. Some say 45 minutes, some are 30, some are like at Northlight in the center east, you have to be there 75 minutes. That's why they picked it. A lot of places you'll show up there and say, "Why the hell do I have to be here 75 minutes early? There's nothing to do." That's just their rules. You just sit there, look cute, and then talk amongst yourselves, and then eventually the house manager will come out and give you your instructions and show you around the venue and so on. And to expand on his question is, a lot of venues, and I'll give you a heads up now, some venues you have to pick up after the show. And generally speaking, it's picking up programs that people drop behind and check for personal items. You'd be surprised how many people forget their cell phones that they're not supposed to have on, and umbrellas and stuff like that, and pick up any personal items. Some venues say, "Nope, we have staff that does that." Every venue's got their own little quirks and so on. But once you finish your assignment, you're free to leave. Yes. Yep, I'm here.
A few comments for people. One is that there are a few venues that want you to pick up personal, food or cups. Most of those will provide you with gloves.
Yep.
And the other is that the cyber line goes on, which is the listing for the usher module. Those drop at midnight on Sunday or midnight Saturday night. And I have been told by people that for popular shows, you need to be on the login within a few minutes of that if you want an
That's right.
assignment.
But to expand on your comment, there is talks at this very moment, not literally this very moment, but there's talks at the board level, which I'm on, to change the Cyberline time from midnight to some time to be in the morning and so on. There isn't, I was talking to Sandra earlier, is the fact that there isn't a one-time fits all for everybody. But in fairness, the midnight thing, and I'm personally, I'll vouch for as well, to get up at midnight just to sign up for a show is kind of a pain. So there's talk about alternating from a midnight time frame to sometime in the morning, and alternate every few months or so on, depending on the situation.
I just wanted to say that the Raiders Theater, my husband and I had the exact same experience that you did, because apparently they sold some tickets at the door, and when the show was going to start, they had one seat left. So they sent us home and gave us tickets for another show.
Yep.
The other thing I was going to mention to you is that, those people who might be thinking about joining, there's always a wait list. So don't think that if it says it's full, it's full. You could get on a wait list, and if somebody cancels, you may be, they'll send out a notification saying, if you want this show, do this, that, or the other thing, and you can get it, right away.
Right. Coordinators, which again, I'm one of, has the right or authority, whatever privilege to create a wait list. It's optional, but most venues, most coordinators will create a wait list. So if If Don and Carol cancel a couple days ahead of time, I'll get a note. And could I have created a wait list? All I have to do is one click on my computer, and everybody that's on my wait list will get an email. And then they'll see there are 2 openings because Don and Carol canceled. First 2 grab it, get it. Yeah, so it's great. It makes my job a lot easier as well.
I have another question about the industry offers. Once you are a member of the Saints, you receive the industry offers every week?
Yeah, you can go, or yes, you can go on to the league's website at any time. There's no password, and just look under industry offers.
But
So on. But yes, the league email comes out usually around Thursday or Friday, and you just go to the page. There's a page and a list every theater that's currently offering industry offers and so on. And you could either, depending on the theater, you can go onto their website. It might give you a code or something else to use to get the discounted rate.
So if you join the Saints
Yes.
and you are a member, whether you work a show or not, you're still eligible to receive the industry
Yeah, we
offer.
automatically add you to the league's email list.
That could be a marketing tool right there.
That's true. We don't like to look at that.
I understand that,
Yes,
yeah.
but yes, that's a good point.
My daughter is a musician in New York and plays on Broadway quite often.
Mhm.
And when we go there, she's quite often able to get us what are called house seats,
Sure.
which are at like either face value or even a little bit below.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I am a night owl, and so I would be really disappointed if you changed the time to morning. But
Okay.
the other thing I wanted to say was there's a benefit that a lot of people that are even saints don't recognize, which is if you're a contributor to a lot of those organizations, in addition to the grants that Saints gives, they will match your donation up to $100 if you submit the paperwork to the organization. And it's not limited to just one $100 donation. So I was really bummed when I retired and lost my matching gift from my corporate match.
Yep.
So this is wonderful because you can still support those organizations doubly.
Yes, she's referring to a program we have called Match Grants. And there's a season when we do this. And yes, so for every dollar you contribute up to $100, we'll match it dollar for dollar in terms of that. By the way, the Saints is a 501c3 organization. Your dues are 100% deductible. Any other questions?
Well,
Great, thank you.